You've entered void of rules, a realm where normal constraints cease to exist. But beware, traveller, there is one rule here. You've got to hit subscribe. Seriously, it's the only rule we have. We just reached 1,000 brave souls, and we're hunting for 9,000 more to complete our dark ritual. I mean, reach our next goal, so subscribe. Or don't. But remember, the void remembers those who defy the only rule. Now let's get into today's video. The weight of the ocean has always called to me. Most people fear those crushing depths, but I find a strange comfort there. The absolute darkness, the silence broken only by your own heartbeat, the sensation of floating in a realm humans were never meant to inhabit. These are the things that made me join the Navy's elite diving program. These are the things that kept me alive when everything went wrong in the Mariana Trench. I should have died with the rest of my team that day. The official report called it equipment failure, but I saw what happened. I saw the way the water moved against currents, the way the darkness seemed to reach out with purpose. I was the only one who made it back to the surface, and I never expected to dive again. The nightmares started 3 weeks after I was pulled from the water. In them, I'm always descending, moving deeper into ink-black water while something vast and patient watches from below. Sometimes I wake up gasping, my bedroom ceiling seeming miles away, as if I'm still down there looking up at an unreachable surface. Other times, I wake with the taste of salt in my mouth, my sheets damp with what I tell myself is just sweat. The doctors called it PTSD, standard psychological response to trauma, survivor's guilt. They prescribed medication and therapy, but nothing touched the real problem. Part of me wanted to go back down, until Director Lawson found me. It was 6 months after the incident. I'd been honorably discharged from the Navy on medical grounds and was living in a small coastal apartment in Washington state. The ocean view was both torment and comfort. I'd spend hours watching the waves, wondering what moved in the depths beyond my sight. The knock at my door came at precisely 3:17 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember checking my watch, a habit from military life. Director Lawson didn't wait for an invitation. She simply walked past me into my living room, her silver hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, her pale blue eyes reminding me of ice over deep water. "Lieutenant Jackson Thompson," she said, not a question but a statement. "Your country needs you again." "I'm not a lieutenant anymore," I replied, "and I don't dive, not since Mariana." She smiled thinly and placed a folder on my coffee table. "That's precisely why we're interested. Your body chemistry changed after the incident," she said, opening the folder to reveal medical charts with sections highlighted in yellow. "You can withstand pressures that would kill an ordinary diver. We need people like you." The charts showed anomalies in my blood work, unusual brainwave patterns during sleep, increased lung capacity. Things I hadn't noticed but had apparently been developing since my rescue. "What agency is this?" I asked, flipping through pages of redacted information. "The Abyssal Recovery Division doesn't officially exist," Lawson replied. "We recover things from places no one else can reach, and we follow a very specific set of protocols to ensure survival." "And if I say no?" Her expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Then we continue monitoring your progressive physiological changes until you either stabilize or become a different kind of asset." The threat was clear enough. 3 days later, I found myself on a converted oil platform 70 miles off the Alaskan coast. The facility had been stripped of all corporate markings and rebuilt with strange reinforced sections that didn't make sense for standard operations. The helipad where we landed bore no insignia, just a number, Station 7. "The previous 6 aren't operational anymore," explained my escort, a tight-lipped security officer who wouldn't give his name. The personnel all wore the same unmarked grey uniforms with no rank insignia, just colour-coded shoulder tabs that apparently indicated their specialisation. Most avoided eye contact. Those who did look at me did so with a mixture of curiosity and what I could only describe as pity. "Fresh meat for the grinder," I heard someone mutter as I passed the mess hall. The command center occupied the heart of the platform, a cavernous space filled with monitoring equipment and screens displaying various oceanic regions. In the center was a three-dimensional holographic map of the ocean floor, highlighting areas marked with pulsing red dots. "Active sites," said a woman's voice behind me, "places where the boundary is thin." I turned to find a small, wiry woman with dark eyes that never seemed to blink, and fingers constantly in motion. She wore the orange shoulder tab of engineering. "Oritz," she said by way of introduction. "I keep the machines running and the pressure out." "What boundary?" I asked, her constant motion stilled for just a moment. "Between their world and ours." Then she laughed, the sound sharp and artificial. "That's what some say anyway. I just fix things." Before I could question her further, an alarm sounded. Not emergency, but a three-tone sequence that prompted everyone to move with purpose toward a large viewing window on the far wall. That's where I first saw the Orpheus, a submarine unlike any I'd encountered in my military career. It was emerging from the depths, surfacing in the docking bay visible through the reinforced glass. Cylindrical but with odd bulges and protrusions, viewing windows made of something thicker than standard glass, and a hull composed of a material I couldn't identify. "Pressure adaptive alloy," Ortiz explained, running her hand along the glass with something close to affection. "She changes at depth, gets stronger the further down we go. We've taken her to places that would crush military subs like soda cans." The docking procedure was methodical and precise. As the bay doors sealed and the water drained, I saw figures emerging from the Orpheus, divers in specialized suits that resembled deep sea exploration gear, but with significant modifications. The helmets were larger, with enhanced viewing ports, and the material seemed to shift slightly, adapting to the changing pressure as the chamber drained. One figure stood apart from the others, taller, broader, with an air of authority that was palpable even through the gear. As he removed his helmet, I saw a weathered face with deep-set eyes, and a scar running from his left temple to his jawline. But what caught my attention was the faint blue tinge to his skin, visible even at this distance. "Captain Rhodes," Ortiz said with a nod of respect. "He's been with the division longer than anyone. 22 years in the deep." Rhodes looked up, somehow sensing our observation, and his eyes locked with mine. There was recognition there, though we'd never met, and something else, a weighing, an assessment. After a moment, he nodded slightly and turned away, directing his team through post-mission protocols. "He doesn't look like someone who's been diving for 22 years, I observed. Deep diving took a toll on the human body. Most veterans showed signs of decompression damage, joint problems, neurological issues. "That's the thing about the deep," Ortiz replied. "It changes you, but not always for the worse." My orientation began formally the next morning. Captain Rhodes conducted it with military precision in a reinforced briefing room, 3 levels below the main deck. "I'll be direct, Thompson," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "Half the people who join this division don't survive their first year. A quarter of the survivors don't remain fully themselves. The work we do is essential, but it comes with costs." "What exactly is this division recovering?" I asked. Rhodes slid a waterproof titanium case across the table. "Before we get to that, you need to understand the rules. They're everything in the deep. Break them, you die. Simple as that." The case contained a manual bound in some kind of treated leather that felt wrong against my skin, too smooth, slightly warm to the touch. The title was embossed in sharp, angular letters: Operational Protocols, Abyssal Environments. The first page contained a warning: "These rules are written in experience and sealed in sacrifice. Deviation ensures termination." Rhodes remained silent as I opened the manual, his eyes never leaving my face. I expected standard diving protocols, buddy systems, equipment checks, emergency procedures. The first few pages delivered exactly that, though with unusual specificity about pressure calculations and breathing mixtures. Then came page 7, and the tone changed entirely. "These 7 rules are non-negotiable," Rhodes said, his expression grave. "Break any of them and you won't come back. The other protocols in the manual are important, but these are the ones that have been written in blood. Rule 1. Maintain 6 feet distance from your dive partner at all times. No exceptions." "Why 6 feet exactly?" I asked. "Because at 7 feet, you can't reach them in time, and at 5 feet, you're too close to differentiate them from what might be mimicking them," Rhodes replied flatly. 6 feet is the safety margin. We determined it empirically." He waited until I nodded before continuing. "Rule 2. If your reflection in any surface doesn't match your movements, terminate dive immediately." "You mean like in glass or metal surfaces?" "Any reflective surface," Rhodes emphasized, "water included. If you see yourself and the movement doesn't align precisely with your actions, you end the dive. No samples, no completion, no hesitation. You get out." I felt a chill despite the room's careful temperature control. What happens if you don't? We recovered Alvarez's equipment 2 days after his incident. The camera footage showed him waving at his reflection before it reached out and... Rhodes paused. "Well, you don't need those details yet." Rule 3. Never respond to sounds of human speech unless visually confirmed with your diving partner. Rule 4. Should you encounter a vertical tunnel extending below the seafloor, do not look down it. "Turner broke that one," Rhodes said before I could ask. Curious about what was down that tunnel. We recovered his equipment 3 weeks later. Just his equipment. Rule 5. Never touch surfaces that emit light or sound without prior authorization. Rule 6. Never remove written materials from compromised sites. Rule 7. If you begin to enjoy the darkness, you've already been compromised. I looked up at this last one. That seems subjective. Rhodes's expression remained neutral, but I noticed his left hand tighten slightly on the table edge. "You'll know when it happens. It's not a preference or a comfort level. It's when the darkness starts feeling like home." He stood abruptly. "Memorize all standard protocols, but these 7 rules are your lifeline. The division has added them one by one, each written after we lost someone." "Who wrote these?" I asked. Rhodes looked at me for a long moment. I did. Before I could process this, the door opened and a woman entered. She moved with unsettling grace, her white lab coat concealing what appeared to be some kind of exoskeletal bracing along her spine. Her face was angular, with high cheekbones and eyes so dark they appeared black in the room's lighting. "Dr. Nakamura," Rhodes introduced her, "our Chief of Marine Biology and Adaptation Research." "You have questions," she said, not quite a smile crossing her lips. It wasn't a guess, she knew. "About a dozen," I admitted. "Let's start with the most important one," she replied, taking a seat across from me. "What are we recovering from the deep?" She activated a projector in the center of the table, and a 3-dimensional image appeared. Geometric structures on the ocean floor, arranged in patterns that seemed vaguely familiar, yet fundamentally wrong. "The deep ocean remains largely unexplored for good reason," she explained. "Certain phenomena occur at extreme depths that defy conventional understanding. What you're looking at shouldn't exist. Structures that predate human civilization showing signs of advanced engineering, found at depths that should make construction impossible." The image shifted to show objects recovered from these structures, artifacts of unknown composition, tablets with unreadable script, and what appeared to be mechanical components that somehow remained uncorroded despite centuries or millennia underwater. "And what's more interesting," Nakamura continued, "is that these sites appear to be active." "Active how?" I asked. That's what we're trying to determine, she replied. Energy signatures, temporal anomalies, biological effects on surrounding marine life. The rules account for these phenomena, each one written after we encountered something new and dangerous. The briefing continued for hours, covering equipment specifications, communication protocols, and emergency procedures. But my mind kept returning to those 7 rules and the obvious question no one was addressing. What exactly was down there that could mimic human speech, create false reflections, and transform people who looked down tunnels? As the orientation concluded, Director Lawson entered the room. Her presence immediately changed the atmosphere. Rhodes straightened fractionally, and even Nakamura's fluid confidence seemed to falter. "Has Captain Rhodes explained the nature of our work, Mr. Thompson?" she asked. "Some of it," I replied carefully. "Good. You'll learn the rest through experience." She placed a tablet on the table, displaying what appeared to be a personnel file, my personnel file, but with extensive medical data I'd never seen before. "Your physiological changes continue to progress. After your incident in the Mariana Trench, your body began adapting to extreme pressure environments in ways we've only seen in a handful of individuals." "I wasn't aware of any changes," I said. "Most aren't at first," she replied, "but your cellular structure, lung capacity, and visual adaptation to low light environments have all modified beyond normal parameters. You're becoming something better suited to the deep. And that's why you wanted me." "Precisely." Lawson's thin smile never reached her eyes. "Our conventional divers can only withstand so much. But you've already begun the transition naturally. With proper training and equipment, you could go deeper than anyone in the division's history." "How many others like me have you found?" I asked. 7 over the past 30 years, she answered. "Only 2 are still active." "And the others?" Lawson's expression remained impassive. "Adaptation is not without risks." The conversation was interrupted by an alarm, a different pattern from the one I'd heard earlier. Lawson checked her tablet and nodded to Rhodes. "It seems your training will begin sooner than anticipated," she said to me. "We've detected an anomalous structure beneath the Arctic shelf. The Orpheus deploys in 6 hours. Captain Rhodes will determine if you're ready to observe." As they left, I remained seated, staring at the rulebook. The leather cover seemed to absorb the light around it, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow alive, listening, waiting. The preparation for my first mission was intensive. For 5 hours, I underwent accelerated training on the Orpheus's systems, emergency protocols, and the specialized diving equipment. The suit they provided was unlike anything I'd used in the Navy. A complex system of pressure-adaptive materials with an onboard computer that monitored everything from body temperature to heart rate to brainwave patterns. "It doesn't just protect you from the environment," explained the technician, a young man named Kessler with steady hands and nervous eyes. "It protects you from yourself in some ways. If your vitals indicate extreme stress or other anomalous patterns, it can initiate emergency ascent protocols independently." "You mean it can override my commands?" I asked. Kessler nodded. "It's happened before. People panic down there, or they change their minds about wanting to come back up." The implications of that statement hung between us until Captain Rhodes arrived to continue my briefing. "You'll be observing only on this dive," he said firmly. "No water time until we've assessed your psychological response to the deep. Some people who've experienced traumatic incidents develop unusual responses when they return to extreme depths." "You mean PTSD triggers?" I asked. Rhodes's expression remained neutral. "Something like that. So, the mission briefed as a relatively straightforward survey. Satellite imagery had detected what appeared to be geometric structures where none should exist, over 900 feet below the surface and partially embedded in the seafloor beneath the Arctic shelf. The structures were too regular to be natural formations, but their location made conventional archaeological explanations unlikely. The Orpheus crew consisted of 15 personnel, Captain Rhodes commanding, Ortiz handling engineering, Nakamura leading the scientific team, plus dive specialists, security personnel, and medical staff. My official designation was Adaptation Specialist in Training, a deliberately vague title that earned me curious glances from the crew. As the submarine prepared for descent, I observed the pre-dive rituals of the team. Some were standard: equipment checks, system diagnostics, communication tests. Others were more unusual. Several divers touched specific points on the hull in the same sequence. Others recited what sounded like personal mantras. One woman carefully tied and retied her hair exactly 7 times. Rhodes noticed my observation. "Everyone develops their patterns," he said quietly. "The ones who survive, anyway. Rituals provide psychological comfort in an environment where predictability means safety." "Do you have one?" I asked. The faint blue tinge in his skin seemed to pulse once before he answered. "I count heartbeats between breaths. 127 every time." The Orpheus descended in near-perfect silence, the only sound the occasional ping of the sonar and the soft murmuring of Ortiz to her engines. The engineering systems on the vessel were extraordinary, more advanced than anything I'd encountered in military service. The pressure hull adapted as we descended, the material visibly shifting at a molecular level to compensate for the increasing external pressure. At 500 feet, we entered a layer of thermocline, the temperature dropping precipitously. The view through the external cameras showed the sunlight fading rapidly, the ocean transforming from blue to deepening indigo, and finally to absolute black. The Orpheus's lights activated automatically, cutting through the darkness to reveal particulate matter drifting in the water like snow in a midnight storm. "We'll reach the target coordinates in 17 minutes, Ortiz announced from her station. "Current depth 820 feet. External pressure 24.7 atmospheres. Rhodes nodded and turned to the dive team. "Nakamura, Davis, you'll take the first survey. Thompson will monitor from control." Nakamura and Davis began their final equipment preparations. Davis was a stocky man with close-cropped hair and eyes that had seen too much. He moved with the careful precision of someone who knew exactly how dangerous his job was. As he checked Nakamura's equipment with practiced efficiency, he never met her gaze directly. "First dive with ARD?" Davis asked me as I followed them to the launch chamber. I nodded. "Remember what you read?" he said, his voice barely audible. "Especially Rule 1. 6 feet apart at all times, no matter what you see or hear. It's saved my life 3 times now." The dive chamber was a marvel of engineering. A spherical room that could flood completely while maintaining a pressure gradient that prevented catastrophic decompression. The divers' suits connected directly to the ship's systems until the last moment, receiving atmospheric and data updates. "Pay special attention to rules 2 and 4 on this dive," Rhodes instructed them, checking the seals on both suits personally. "We've had incidents with similar structures before." The chamber sealed, and I watched through the monitoring station as it flooded with icy water. The temperature sensors on the divers' suits registered the extreme cold, but their internal systems compensated automatically. At 890 feet, the external chamber opened, and Nakamura and Davis moved out into the abyss. The communication system crackled as ice shifted above the Orpheus, partially cutting off direct contact with the divers. "Maintain visual," Davis's voice came through with static. "Remember Rule 1 inch." I watched through the camera feeds as they descended towards the seafloor, their lights cutting through the darkness to reveal what waited below. The structure emerged from the gloom like a forgotten temple. Massive stone blocks arranged in configurations that seemed to challenge gravity, archways that supported too much weight. angles that shouldn't maintain structural integrity. But the most disturbing aspect was their orientation. The entire complex appeared to be built upside down, with what should be the foundation pointing toward the surface. Preliminary scan and samples only, Rhodes's voice crackled through the partial interference. No interior exploration without secondary authorization. They approached cautiously, maintaining their distance from each other as required. Their lights revealed carvings on the stone surfaces, symbols that resembled no written language I recognized but nonetheless seemed almost readable from certain angles, as if they were designed to be comprehended not by the conscious mind, but by something deeper and more instinctual. Davis began collecting samples while Nakamura recorded video of the structure. The exterior cameras on their suits transmitted everything to the monitoring station where I watched, fascinated and disturbed in equal measure. The architecture shouldn't have been possible, not just because of its location, but because the stone itself seemed to defy fundamental physical properties. Some sections appeared to phase partially through others, while certain angles changed depending on the viewing perspective. That's when I noticed the fish, small bioluminescent creatures moving around the ruins. At first they seemed normal, until I realized they were swimming backwards, their movements precise and coordinate in a way that natural marine life never moved. Before I could alert Rhodes, Davis started counting over the communication system. 10, 9, 8. His voice was monotone, empty. "Davis, what are you doing?" Nakamura asked, maintaining the required distance. 7, 6, 5. He turned toward her, his movements jerky and unnatural. "Rhodes," I called out, "something's wrong with Davis." Rhodes was already moving, his expression darkening. "Emergency protocol. Davis is counting. Get them back now." 4, 3. Davis's hands moved to his oxygen supply regulators. Nakamura swam toward him, breaking Rule 1, but clearly understanding what was about to happen. She grabbed his arms just as he reached 1, restraining him as he thrashed against her. The camera feed from Davis's helmet showed his eyes, behind the diving mask, were unfocused, looking at something none of us could see. With considerable effort, Nakamura managed to drag him back to the extraction point where mechanical arms from the Orpheus secured them and pulled them inside. The moment they breached the submarine's airlock, Davis went limp. The recovery team moved with practiced efficiency, securing Davis to a medical gurney, while Nakamura underwent rapid decontamination procedures. I followed Rhodes to the medical bay, where Dr. Keller, the chief medical officer, was already attending to Davis. When he regained consciousness 10 minutes later, Davis had no memory of the incident. "I was collecting samples, then I woke up here," he insisted as Dr. Keller examined him. "I never started counting." "The suit recordings say otherwise," Rhodes replied, his tone neutral but his expression concerned. "Play them for me," Davis demanded. Rhodes nodded to a technician who brought up the audio recording. Davis listened to his own voice counting down, his face paling as the reality sank in. "That's not possible," he whispered. "I don't remember any of that." "It's the third incident of memory dissolution we've recorded at similar sites," Dr. Keller noted, checking Davis's pupillary response. "No sign of concussion or oxygen deprivation. Brain activity appears normal." "Quarantine protocol," Rhodes ordered. 72 hours minimum. As the medical team prepared to move Davis to the isolation unit, I noticed Nakamura standing in the doorway, her expression thoughtful rather than concerned. In her hands, she held something, a small obsidian cube recovered from where Davis had been working. It sat now in a containment unit, appearing to absorb all light directed at it, rather than reflecting any. Rhodes saw it too. "Containment lab. Full isolation procedures," he ordered. Nakamura nodded and departed without speaking, but the look she gave me as she passed contained something I couldn't quite identify. Expectation, perhaps, as if she'd been waiting for me to notice. The Orpheus began its ascent, systems humming, as the pressure gradually decreased. I found myself drawn to the observation bubble, a reinforced viewing port at the bow of the submarine that offered an unobstructed view of the surrounding waters. As we rose, I watched the ruins disappear into the darkness below, their strange geometries lingering in my mind. "First time seeing an anomalous sight?" asked a voice behind me. I turned to find Ortiz, her constant nervous energy now focused on a tablet displaying the Orpheus's system diagnostics. "Is that what we call them? Anomalous sights?" She shrugged. "That's the official designation. Most of the crew has other names for them. Thin spots, wrong places, doorways." "Doorways to what?" Ortiz looked up, her dark eyes reflecting the dim light of the observation bubble. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Nakamura thinks they're remnants of a pre-human civilization that learned to exist at pressures we can barely survive. Rhodes believes they're something else entirely, intrusions from somewhere that isn't quite here." "And what do you think?" I asked. Her fingers tapped a restless pattern on the tablet. "I think the deep ocean is the closest thing to alien territory we have on Earth. Conditions so different from our surface world that they might as well be another planet. Maybe what lives down there has always been there, evolving alongside us, but in completely different directions." She glanced at the diagnostic readings and frowned slightly. "Pressure anomaly in the engine compartment. Excuse me." As she left, I remained at the viewport, staring into the darkness through which we ascended. For just a moment, I thought I saw something moving far below, larger than any marine life I recognized, its movements deliberate and coordinated. Then it was gone, and I was left wondering if it had been real or a trick of light and shadow in the abyss. That night, I couldn't sleep. My quarters on the Orpheus were Spartan but comfortable, designed for functionality rather than aesthetics. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ruins, the strange symbols that seemed almost comprehensible, the fish swimming backwards with unnatural precision, and Davis counting down to something only he could see. I reviewed the mission footage on my tablet, focusing on the moments before Davis began his countdown. The camera feed showed nothing unusual, just the exploration of the site, the collection of samples. But then I noticed something odd. In the reflection on a particularly smooth stone surface, Davis's movements didn't quite match his actual actions. The reflection moved a fraction of a second before Davis did, as if anticipating rather than mimicking. Rule 2 flashed in my mind. If your reflection in any surface doesn't match your movements, terminate dive immediately. But Davis hadn't noticed, or if he hadn't reported it. And shortly after, he began counting down. I was still pondering this when there was a soft knock at my door. It was well past midnight according to the ship's clock, and most of the crew would be sleeping or on essential duty stations. I opened the door to find Dr. Nakamura, her lab coat exchanged for standard off-duty attire, but still moving with that unsettling grace that suggested her exoskeletal bracing remained in place. "You're reviewing the mission footage," she said, glancing at my tablet. Not a question. "Davis's reflection moved before he did," I replied, just before the counting started. "You have good eyes," she observed. "Most people wouldn't catch that, especially on their first exposure." "What happened to him out there?" Nakamura considered me for a moment, then gestured to the corridor. "Walk with me. Some conversations are better had in motion." The night cycle lighting aboard the Orpheus was dimmed to a soft blue that reminded me of bioluminescent organisms, creating pools of shadow between illuminated sections. Nakamura led me through circuitous passageways toward the lower laboratories, her movements precise and economical. "What do you know about extremophiles, Thompson?" she asked as we walked. "Organisms that thrive in extreme environments," I replied. "High temperature, high pressure, high acidity." "Yes, but more specifically, They're organisms that have adapted to conditions that would kill most life forms. They don't just survive, they flourish where nothing else can. She paused at a security door, scanning her ID and entering a complex code. The deep ocean is full of them, creatures that have evolved in ways we're only beginning to understand. The laboratory beyond was dimly lit and dominated by a central containment unit, a transparent chamber filled with seawater at high pressure. Within it floated the obsidian cube recovered from the site. "This is the 7th such artifact we've recovered," Nakamura said, approaching the chamber, each one found at a different anomalous site, each one exhibiting the same unusual properties. "What properties?" I asked, studying the cube. It appeared to be made of perfectly smooth, featureless black stone, roughly 4 inches on each side. In response, Nakamura activated a scanner that directed various wavelengths of light at the cube. Each beam disappeared into the surface without reflection or scattering. "It absorbs all electromagnetic radiation," she explained, "no matter the frequency or intensity. It also distorts electronic signals and, most interestingly, affects biological systems that remain in its proximity for extended periods." "Affects how?" She turned to face me directly. "It changes them, accelerates adaptation to deep pressure environments, enhances certain neurological functions while suppressing others. The specimens we've tested show rapid physiological changes, increased pressure tolerance, improved low light vision, altered brain activity patterns." "Human specimens?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Volunteers from previous teams," she confirmed without a trace of ethical concern. "The results have been promising in many cases." "And in the others?" "Adaptation is not without risks," she echoed Lawson's earlier statement. "But those who successfully integrate the changes gain abilities beyond conventional human limitations." She reached into a drawer and removed a folder, sliding it across to me. "You're not the first person to survive an incident like your experience in the Mariana Trench. These are the others we've identified over the years." The folder contained photographs dating back to the 1970s, each showing individuals who had survived mysterious deep ocean incidents. Each photograph was marked with a date and a status update. Many were labelled terminated or contained. Only a few indicated active service. "What happened to them?" I asked. "Some couldn't handle the changes and were institutionalized. Others embraced them too fully and had to be managed. A select few, like Captain Rhodes, found balance, human enough to function in our world, adapted enough to work in theirs." "Theirs?" The pronoun choice wasn't lost on me. Nakamura's dark eyes gleamed in the dim laboratory lighting. "We aren't the first intelligent species to inhabit this planet, Thompson. Just the most recent to dominate its surface." Before I could process that statement, the ship's alarm system activated. Not the standard alert, but a pulsing pattern that immediately put Nakamura on alert. "Proximity alarm," she said, securing the cube and the folder with swift, practiced movements. "Something's approaching the Orpheus." We hurried to the command center where Captain Rhodes was already coordinating the response. The external camera feeds showed nothing but darkness, but the sonar display revealed something massive moving below. The submarine? Something that wasn't registering on thermal imaging or standard detection protocols. "Evasive maneuvers," Rhodes ordered, his voice calm but edged with tension. "Bring us up another 200 feet and activate the sonic deterrents." The Orpheus's engines hummed as we ascended more rapidly, the hull creaking under the strain of the sudden pressure change. On the sonar display, the unidentified object changed course, mirroring our movement with unnerving precision. "Whatever it is, it's following us deliberately," Ortiz reported from the engineering station. "Pattern matches previous encounters at sites 3 and 5. "Activate countermeasures," Rhodes commanded. A high-pitched pulse emanated from the Orpheus, inaudible to human ears but designed to disrupt the sensory systems of large marine predators. The sonar showed the entity hesitating, then slowly descending back into the depths. The tension in the command center eased fractionally, but Rhodes remained vigilant. Maintain current depth and continue monitoring. I want double watches until we reach the extraction point. As the crew returned to their stations, Rhodes noticed me standing with Nakamura. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Dr. Nakamura, I wasn't aware you were conducting orientation tours during alert conditions," he said, his tone neutral but his meaning clear. "Mr. Thompson noticed anomalies in the mission footage that warranted discussion," she replied smoothly. "His observational skills are quite impressive for a novice." Rhodes turned his attention to me. "What anomalies?" I described the discrepancy in Davis's reflection, watching Rhodes's reaction carefully. The captain's expression remained controlled, but I noticed his left hand tighten slightly at his side. "Good catch," he acknowledged after a moment. "That's exactly the kind of detail that can save lives down there. But in the future, report such observations through proper channels." "Yes, sir," I replied, falling back on military protocol. As Nakamura departed for her laboratory, Rhodes held me back with a slight gesture. "Be careful with Dr. Nakamura," he said quietly. "Her perspective on our work is unorthodox. She seems to have a unique understanding of the anomalous sites," I observed. "Too unique," Rhodes replied. "She spent more time studying the artifacts than anyone, and prolonged exposure has effects." He checked the sonar display before continuing. "There are factions within the division, Thompson. Those who believe our mission is to study and contain what we find, and those who see it as something else entirely." "And which faction are you?" I asked. The blue tinge beneath his skin pulsed once, reminding me that whatever Rhodes was, he wasn't entirely human anymore. "I'm for survival," he said simply, "both yours and mine." 3 days after our return to Station 7, I was summoned to Director Lawson's office. The time aboard the Orpheus had been filled with intensive training and debriefings about the Arctic Shelf mission. Davis remained in quarantine, his condition stable, but his memory of the incident still completely absent. The obsidian cube had been transferred to a secure laboratory within the station where Nakamura and her team conducted continuous analysis. Lawson's office occupied the highest level of the station, with reinforced windows offering a panoramic view of the turbulent Northern Sea. Unlike the utilitarian design of the rest of the facility, her space featured wood paneling and actual paper books, rare luxuries in the harsh marine environment. "Your adaptation is progressing faster than anticipated," she said without preamble as I entered. A holographic display on her desk showed my latest medical scans, highlighting changes in cellular structure and neurological patterns. "Dr. Keller reports your pressure tolerance has increased 18% since your arrival." "I wasn't aware of any testing," I said, trying to keep the unease from my voice. "The monitoring is passive and continuous," she replied dismissively. "Your quarters, the common areas, the training facilities, all equipped with biosensors that track physiological changes in real time," Lawson continued, rotating the holographic display to show a timeline of my adaptation. "Most recruits take months to show the level of change you've exhibited in days." "And that's a good thing?" I asked, eyeing the rising curves on the display. "It's promising," she corrected. "Accelerated adaptation indicates neuroplasticity and cellular resilience. Those who adapt quickly tend to maintain psychological stability through the process. And those who don't?" Lawson's thin smile didn't reach her eyes. "They experience difficulties." She stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the churning ocean. "We're preparing for another mission, a higher priority target this time. The data recovered from the Arctic site has revealed connections to a location we've been monitoring in the North Pacific." "The obsidian cube," I guessed. "Yes. The artifact's energy signature matches others we've recovered over the years. We believe they're components of something larger, a network or system created by whoever built the ruins. Dr. Nakamura mentioned this was the 7th such cube, I said carefully, watching for her reaction. Lawson's posture stiffened slightly. Dr. Nakamura shares information rather liberally, it seems. She thought my observations about Davis's reflection warranted further discussion. Indeed. Lawson turned back to face me. What did you make of her theories? I chose my words carefully, aware that I was being tested. They seemed to align with the evidence, though her interpretations are more expansive than what the data strictly supports. That earned me a genuine, if brief, smile. Diplomatically put, Nakamura is brilliant but prone to leaps of intuition that occasionally outpace scientific rigor. That said, her work with the artifacts has been invaluable. She returned to her desk and activated another display. A topographic map of the ocean floor showing a deep trench in the North Pacific. This is our next target, a formation that appeared 6 months ago following seismic activity in the region. Initial surveys indicate an underwater structure far larger than anything we've encountered previously. The scale indicator beside the map sent a chill through me. The structure was massive, at least a quarter-mile in diameter. What exactly are we looking for? I asked. Answers, Lawson replied simply, about who built these sites, what the artifacts do, and why your body chemistry changed after your incident in the Mariana Trench. Captain Rhodes believes the locations are connected, points on a map that, when properly interpreted, reveals something significant. And what do you believe, Director? Her pale eyes fixed on me with uncomfortable intensity. I believe in preparation, Mr. Thompson. Whatever's down there has been waiting a very long time. We should be ready when we finally meet it properly. Her tablet chimed with an alert, and she checked it with a slight frown. The Orpheus is ready for your advanced training session. Report to Docking Bay 3. As I turned to leave, she added, One more thing, Thompson. Whatever Captain Rhodes may have told you about factions within the division, remember that I determine the parameters of our mission. Not him, not Nakamura, and certainly not whatever theories you might be developing. The threat was clear enough. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of intensive training. I learned the Orpheus's systems inside and out, practiced emergency protocols until they became instinct, and underwent specialized conditioning to prepare my body for the extreme pressures we'd encounter. The rulebook became my constant companion. I studied it during meals, before sleep, between training sessions, internalizing not just the critical 7 rules, but all the ancillary protocols that supported them. During this time, I saw little of Captain Rhodes, who was occupied with mission planning, or Dr. Nakamura, who remained focused on analyzing the obsidian cube. Davis was eventually released from quarantine, but transferred to another facility for extended observation. My primary contact became Engineer Ortiz, whose practical approach to the mysteries of the deep was refreshingly straightforward. The way I see it, she explained as we conducted maintenance on diving equipment, it doesn't matter if they're aliens, ancient humans, or some evolution we never knew about. What matters is understanding their technology. These structures shouldn't exist at those depths. The materials, the engineering, it's all way beyond our capabilities. If we can reverse engineer even a fraction of it. What about the effects on the divers? I asked. The physiological changes, the incidents like what happened to Davis. Ortiz's hands stilled momentarily on the equipment. That's the price of discovery, isn't it? No different from radiation exposure for early nuclear scientists or disease risk for medical researchers. Except what? She glanced around the maintenance bay before continuing in a lower voice. Except these changes aren't all bad. Rhodes has been diving longer than anyone, and he's healthier than most 30-year-olds. His pressure tolerance is off the charts. His cellular regeneration is unprecedented. Whatever's happening to the long-term divers, It's not just damage, it's transformation. Before I could question her further, the station alarm sounded. 3 short bursts followed by a continuous tone that made my teeth vibrate. Emergency deployment. The mission briefing was chaotic. Underwater research station Depth Point 7 had gone dark 40 minutes earlier. Last transmissions reported structural anomalies and pressure inconsistencies before communication ceased. The station housed 12 researchers studying deep sea thermal vents near the trench Lawson had shown me. "This is a rescue operation," Director Lawson's voice came through the command center speakers. "Priority is personnel recovery. The station's research is secondary." But I caught the look she exchanged with Dr. Nakamura. There was something at that station they wanted. The Orpheus deployed with a skeleton crew, Captain Rhodes commanding, Ortiz handling engineering, Nakamura leading the scientific team, plus myself and 3 security specialists named Kessler, Harlow, and Diaz. The mission parameters were clear: retrieve survivors and secure critical research data. The descent to depth Point 7 was tense. Instrument readings fluctuated wildly, showing pressure variations that should have been physically impossible. The water itself seemed wrong, too thick, too resistant against the hull. "It's like diving through mercury," Ortiz murmured to her control panel. "The density is all wrong." When we reached the station, the exterior appeared intact until we circled to the eastern section. Somehow a portion of the structure had phased through solid bedrock. The metal and rock fused in impossible ways. It was as if the station had been partially rotated through another dimension. Rhodes assembled the rescue team, myself, Ortiz for technical support, and Kessler for security. I was surprised to be included, given my limited experience, but Rhodes was direct about his reasoning. "Your adaptation profile suggests you'll handle the anomalies better than most," he said as we prepared our gear. "Besides, we're short-handed, and this is the best crash course you could get." His final instructions were explicit. "If anyone at the station speaks in rhymes or riddles, sedate them immediately before extraction. And remember Rule 6, no removing written materials." The emphasis on Rule 6 struck me as odd, specific to this mission in a way the other warnings hadn't been. We entered through the emergency airlock, finding the interior lit only by emergency lighting that pulsed at irregular intervals. The air was breathable, but had a metallic taste that coated the tongue. Most disturbing was the water, puddles on the floor that dripped upward, collecting on the ceiling in defiance of gravity. We found the first survivor huddled in the communications room, her eyes wide and unblinking. Dr. Foster, according to her ID badge, exhibited no physical injuries but repeatedly whispered the same phrase: "It rises by descending, always patient, always watching." Kessler sedated her immediately, following protocol. 2 more researchers were found in the laboratory section, arguing intensely over a whiteboard filled with equations. They stopped when we entered, turning to us with synchronized movements. "The depths have teeth," one said calmly. "But no mouth to feed," the other finished. Both were sedated and prepared for extraction. As we moved deeper into the station, the architectural impossibilities became more pronounced. Corridors twisted at angles that hurt to look at. Doorways led to the same room from different approaches. In one section, water filled the ceiling half of a corridor, while the bottom remained dry, with no barrier between the 2 states. "Spatial distortion," Ortiz muttered, her instruments failing to provide coherent readings. "The whole station is warping around some kind of focal point." That focal point, we discovered, was the main research laboratory. The room had been transformed, equipment fused with walls, monitors displaying impossible data, and at the center a familiar black cube twice the size of the one we'd recovered from the Arctic site. "Jackpot," whispered Kessler, his eyes fixed on the cube. Ortiz immediately began downloading the station's research data while I searched for remaining survivors. In a small office adjacent to the lab, I found Dr. Hoffman, the station's lead researcher. Unlike the others, he appeared physically altered. His skin had a waxy, translucent quality, and his movements were fluid in a way that reminded me of deep sea creatures. "You're from Abyssal Recovery," he said, his voice surprisingly normal, despite his appearance. "Here for the cube and the research, not for us." "We're here for everyone," I replied, checking his vital signs. They were stable but unusual. Slowed heart rate, reduced body temperature, altered respiratory pattern. Hoffman laughed softly. "No need to lie, I understand the priority. The cube is changing, growing, communicating." "With whom?" I asked. "With us, with what's below, with what's waiting." His eyes focused on me with sudden clarity. "You're changing too. I can see it in your cellular structure. The deep has already claimed you, you just don't know it yet." Behind him, on his desk, lay a personal journal, bound in weathered leather, its pages filled with dense handwriting. While Hoffman continued his unsettling monologue, I glimpsed pages covering everything from standard research notes to increasingly bizarre observations about the cube and its effects. Rule 6 echoed in my mind. Never remove written materials from compromised sites. But this was primary source data, direct observations from the scientist most exposed to the cube. As Hoffman turned to point at some equations on a nearby board, I made a split-second decision and slipped the journal into my equipment bag. We located 6 more survivors, each in various states of psychological distress, all speaking of the patience of the depths and the gift of pressure. During extraction of the final group, I noticed something massive moving in the water beyond the viewports, a shadow that seemed to follow our progress but never approached directly. "Movement outside the station," I reported to Rhodes, over the comm system. "Large entity, uncertain classification." "Maintain extraction protocol," Rhodes replied, his voice steady. "Do not engage or observe directly." The rescue was successful. All 12 researchers recovered alive, though severely altered mentally. The Orpheus surfaced 3 hours later, transferring the survivors to a medical vessel for quarantine and observation. That night, alone in my quarters aboard the Orpheus as we returned to Station 7, I examined the journal I'd smuggled on board. I had broken Rule 6, but my instincts told me this document contained critical information, answers to questions no one seemed willing to address directly. The journal belonged to Dr. Hoffman, as I'd suspected, and the early entries detailed standard research notes on thermal vent ecosystems. But as the dates progressed, the writing changed both in content and character, becoming more fluid, the letters sometimes appearing to shift on the page as if reluctant to remain fixed. "The water has memories," one entry read. "We've detected pattern oscillations in the deep currents that cannot be explained by thermal or gravitational forces. It's as if the ocean itself is thinking." Further entries documented unexplained phenomena. "The fish are evolving before our eyes. Species showing adaptations that should take thousands of generations appearing in weeks. Jenkins thinks something is accelerating their development purposefully. The cube grows incrementally each day, not physically but in complexity. New patterns appear on its surface when viewed under specific wavelengths of light. They resemble the same symbols found at other sites but animated, changing, like a language evolving in real time." The final entries disturbed me most. The pressure brings clarity. What we perceive as darkness is merely our limited understanding. It isn't empty down there. It's more full than our minds can comprehend. It speaks through the weight of water. They're not artifacts or technology, as we understand it. They're extensions, sensory organs of something vast and patient. The cubes are eyes, watching us as we watch them. The ruins are fingers, reaching upward. What does that make the ocean floor itself? The last page contained a hurried note. "It's offering us something." I can feel my body changing to accept the gift. The others fear it, but I understand now. The rules were never meant to protect us from it, but to prepare us for it. I noticed several pages had been torn out, and from the stains on the binding, apparently consumed by Hoffman. The implication was both bizarre and horrifying. He had literally internalized whatever knowledge those pages contained. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the disturbed water outside depth point 7, the massive shadow moving with deliberate purpose, and Hoffman's transformed face as he spoke of changes he could see in me. 2 weeks after the depth point 7 rescue, I began noticing changes that confirmed Hoffman's observation. My night vision improved dramatically. I could navigate the Orpheus's corridors during low-light emergency drills without assistance. I could hold my breath for nearly 7 minutes without discomfort. During pressure training, the headaches that had plagued me since my Navy days disappeared completely. During a routine physical, Dr. Nakamura noticed it first. My blood samples moved with purpose under the microscope, forming and reforming into patterns before settling. "How long have you been experiencing changes?" she asked without looking up from the microscope. "I don't know what you mean," I lied, unwilling to reveal how much I'd observed in myself. She finally looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "Your cellular structure is reorganizing itself, similar to what we've seen in long-term deep pressure exposure cases, but more directed." I should have reported these symptoms immediately, but instead I asked, "Has this happened before?" "To varying degrees, yes," she admitted. "Captain Rhodes has been with the division for 22 years. His blood no longer contains hemoglobin, as we understand it. It carries oxygen more efficiently using compounds we've only observed in certain deep-sea creatures. That evening, during a shower, I noticed my skin briefly ripple, in a way that skin shouldn't be able to move, not stretching or flexing, but flowing, like water disturbed by a deep current. I pressed my hand against the mirror, watching my reflection. For just a moment, the reflection's eyes looked somewhere else before aligning with my gaze. Rule 2 flashed through my mind. If your reflection doesn't match your movements, terminate dive immediately. But I wasn't diving, at least not in water. I was diving into whatever transformation the deep had initiated in me. The next morning, Director Lawson ordered me confined to quarters, citing potential contamination concerns. The medical scan results had obviously been reported up the chain, but Captain Rhodes came to me privately, overriding the lockdown on my door. "They always isolate the ones who start changing," he said matter-of-factly. "But we need people like you for what's coming." "What is coming?" I asked. "A confrontation that's been building since we first started exploring the deep. There are factions within ARD, those who fear what's happening and those who see it as inevitable evolution." He revealed that Dr. Nakamura had been studying these physiological changes for years and believed they were not contamination, but adaptation, the next step for humanity in conquering the deep ocean. "There's a reason humans evolved from sea creatures," Rhodes said, the blue tinge in his skin pulsing slightly. "Some of us are just going back." "And where do you stand in this division?" I asked. Rhodes was silent for a long moment. "I've been fighting it for 22 years, he finally said. "Trying to maintain balance, human enough to remember why we need to be careful, adapted enough to understand what we're facing." "What exactly are we facing?" "Something that's been waiting longer than humans have existed. Something that remembers when the oceans were young and the land was just beginning to form." He fixed me with an intense gaze. "Something that's getting impatient." 3 days into my supposed quarantine, seismic sensors detected unprecedented activity in the Pacific, creating a new oceanic trench that formed too quickly and too precisely to be natural. Initial readings showed it reached depths beyond our equipment's capacity to measure, potentially deeper than the Mariana Trench. "This is what we've been waiting for," Nakamura announced during the emergency briefing. The patterns match predictions from previous seismic events in 89 and 02. The Orpheus deployed despite mechanical issues and growing tensions among the crew. I was included in the mission, despite Lawson's quarantine order. Rhodes had convinced her that my adaptation might be valuable in the extreme environment we'd be facing. As I prepared my diving equipment, I discovered something troubling. There appeared to be a hidden rule, something referred to as Rule 0, mentioned in several places in Hoffman's journal, but never stated explicitly. References to it appeared alongside his most disturbing observations about the deep and whatever waited there. The dive to the newly formed trench pushed the Orpheus beyond its designed capabilities. The hull creaked and moaned as we descended, the pressure-adaptive alloy working furiously to compensate. Engineer Ortiz whispered continuously to her engines, her hands trembling on the controls. "We've never gone this deep before," Kessler murmured, checking his equipment for the 4th time. "Rhodes is pushing it too far." At 28,000 feet, our external lights revealed something impossible. The trench walls were perfectly geometric, with smooth surfaces that couldn't have been formed by natural tectonic movement. It resembled an immense artificial shaft descending into the earth. At the bottom, we found it, a massive circular structure embedded in the seafloor, its diameter approximately 300 feet across. It resembled a hatch or door, with intricate mechanisms around its perimeter that appeared to be ancient yet untouched by corrosion or marine growth. "Preliminary analysis only," Rhodes ordered, his voice tight with what might have been fear or excitement. "No physical contact with the structure." Fisher, a newer team member, led the initial survey team, with Nakamura supervising. I monitored from inside the Orpheus, watching through their camera feeds as they approached the structure. The readings from their equipment fluctuated wildly, radiation levels spiking and dropping, electromagnetic pulses emanating from the center of the hatch. That's when it happened. The structure activated. There's no other word for it. Patterns along its surface illuminated with blue-green light, and the mechanisms began to rotate slowly. The movement caused devastating equipment failures across all external systems. Communication with the survey team fragmented. Through the static, I heard Fisher. God, it's beautiful. Can you see the patterns? They're talking to us." Rhodes's voice cut through. "Fisher, maintain protocol. Do not approach the central section." But Fisher moved forward as if in a trance. The camera feed showed his gloved hand reaching out. Rule 5. Never touch surfaces that emit light or sound without prior authorization. The moment Fisher's hand made contact, his body convulsed. The camera feed showed his diving suit bulging and rippling, as if something inside was reshaping itself. His scream came through the communication system before it cut out entirely. "Emergency ascent, now," Rhodes ordered, his composure finally breaking. The return to the Orpheus was chaotic. The other team members managed to drag Fisher back despite his violent resistance. By the time they reached the airlock, Fisher's diving suit had begun to split along the seams, revealing flesh that no longer looked entirely human, darker with a texture like wet leather, stretched over too many joints. "Containment Protocol Theta," Rhodes barked as they pulled Fisher into the pressure chamber. "Lock it down." Through the chamber's viewport, we watched in horror as Fisher's transformation continued, his body elongated, limbs bending at new angles, his face stretching and reconfiguring, while he remained horribly conscious throughout the process. "Help me," he managed to say, his voice distorted by a mouth no longer shaped for human speech. "It's showing me everything." Director Lawson's voice came through the command system. "Captain Rhodes, initiate. Protocol sundering." Rhodes hesitated, looking at Fisher with what appeared to be recognition rather than disgust. "He's still transforming. We could learn, "That's an order, Captain." As Rhodes moved to the control panel, Dr. Nakamura grabbed his arm. "We knew this would happen," she hissed. "This is what we've been preparing for." That's when I understood. They had expected this outcome. This wasn't a rescue mission or a scientific expedition. It was a test, and Fisher had been the subject. Before Rhodes could enter the commands, the Orpheus lurched violently to one side. Warning systems blared as external pressure readings spiked beyond possible levels. "Something's following us up," Ortiz shouted from the engine room. "The sensors show movement, massive movement, from the trench." Fisher pressed his transformed hand against the chamber glass, the flesh now webbed and partially translucent. "It's coming," he said with something like reverence. "The gift giver is coming for us all." I stumbled back to my quarters as the submarine began emergency ascent procedures, the hull groaning under impossible stress. Inside, I frantically searched Hoffman's journal for anything that might explain what was happening. In my haste, I dislodged a hidden compartment in the binding, revealing a folded page with what appeared to be Rule 0. Written in what appeared to be dried blood, "What rises must descend again. The changed ones are not victims, they are vessels." That's when the hull breach alarm sounded. The next hours passed in a blur of emergency protocols and desperate measures. A catastrophic breach in the lower sections forced evacuation of most crew members to pressure-sealed life pods. Only a skeleton crew remained aboard the rapidly failing Orpheus. Captain Rhodes, Dr. Nakamura, Engineer Ortiz, myself, and 3 security personnel. "We need to overload the core," Rhodes announced, his skin now openly pulsing with blue light beneath the surface. "Collapse the trench before it can follow us up." "Are you insane?" Ortiz screamed. "That would tear a hole in the ocean floor." "Better that than letting it reach the surface," Rhodes replied grimly. As they argued, Dr. Nakamura pulled me aside, her exoskeletal bracing, now visibly moving beneath her lab coat. "You've been reading Hoffman's journal," she said, not a question but a statement. "You broke Rule 6. "You knew what would happen to Fisher," I accused. "You've known all along what's down there." "Not what, who," she corrected. "The original inhabitants of this planet's oceans, waiting for worthy vessels to return to them." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing skin that had the same leather-like quality Fisher's had begun developing. "I've been changing for 11 years, she said, slowly, carefully, one broken rule at a time. Each violation alters you a little more, prepares your body to receive their consciousness. You're deliberately breaking the rules. Why?" "Because they're not meant to protect us," she said with frightening conviction. "They're a test to identify those strong enough to become like them. The rules were written backwards. Breaking them doesn't doom you, it transforms you." The submarine shuddered as another section collapsed under pressure. We were running out of time. Rhodes appeared in the doorway, a harpoon gun in his hands. "Step away from them, Nakamura. I won't let you complete the conversion." Nakamura smiled sadly. "You're still fighting it after all these years. I thought you of all people would understand." "I understand perfectly," Rhodes replied. "I was there for the first contact in 78. I watched my entire team transform. I helped write the rules to prevent it from happening again." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "You're the surviving member who wrote the rulebook." Rhodes nodded, never taking his eyes off Nakamura. "They modified me to forget, to start fresh as their perfect inside man. But I remember everything now." Security alarms blared as something massive struck the Orpheus from below. The impact threw us all off balance. "It's too late," Nakamura laughed, her voice taking on harmonics that hurt my ears. "The worthy ones have been chosen." With horror, I realized my diving suit had begun fusing with my skin along my wrists and neck. The changes had been happening so gradually I hadn't noticed until now. My fingers slightly webbed, my peripheral vision sharper underwater than it should be. Rhodes saw it too. "You've been compromised," he said flatly. "When did you break the first rule?" I thought back to the journal I'd taken from Depth Point 7, Rule 6, violated without a second thought. Then there was Rule 1, broken when I saved Davis during the Arctic mission. And finally Rule 7, if you begin to enjoy the darkness, you've already been compromised. The truth was, I had begun to enjoy the darkness. The deep had called to me from the beginning, even before the Mariana Trench incident. Perhaps that's why I survived when others didn't. It had chosen me long ago. "We need to finish this," Rhodes said, handing me a detonator. "Override the core safeties. Set the Orpheus to implode at maximum depth." "Don't listen," Nakamura pleaded, her eyes now entirely black. "You're so close to understanding. The hatch isn't meant to let something out. It's meant to let worthy ones in." Another impact rocked the submarine. Through the viewport, I caught a glimpse of something vast moving in the darkness. Not a solid entity, but a shifting mass of possibilities. A presence so ancient it made human civilization seem like a momentary spark in an eternal night. "Make your choice," Rhodes demanded. In that moment of clarity, I finally understood. Every rule I had broken had altered me incrementally. Each violation had prepared my body for something beyond human comprehension. The rules weren't protection, they were a screening process to identify suitable vessels. I looked at the detonator in my hand, then at Rule 0 again. What rises must descend again. The final choice was mine. I could destroy the Orpheus, collapse the trench, and potentially save humanity from whatever waited below. Or I could embrace the transformation and become something beyond human understanding. I felt the pressure of the deep calling to me, not crushing but embracing. I felt the changes in my body, not as corruption but as evolution. A return to the ancient home from which all life emerged. I felt the weight of the ocean above us, around us, within us. I made my decision, and somewhere in the crushing depths, the Ancient Ones welcomed their newest vessel home. Department of Abyssal Recovery Orientation Briefing Location, Outpost Thalassa. Date, November 17th, 2025. Welcome to the newly established Abyssal Recovery Division, Beta Team, the orientation leader announced to the assembled group of specialists. "My name is Director Lawson. You've been selected for your unique qualifications and adaptability to extreme conditions." She gestured to a reinforced submarine, docked in the massive underwater bay beneath the facility. It resembled the Orpheus, but with significant modifications and reinforcement. "The Eurydice will be your operational base for the foreseeable future. Your mission is to recover critical assets from the previous expedition." Behind her, a screen displayed underwater footage of the Orpheus resting at an impossible depth. Its hull partially transformed into something that no longer appeared entirely mechanical. The structure had begun to integrate with the surrounding environment, becoming part of the seafloor in ways that defied conventional engineering. "You'll notice several revisions to the standard protocol manual," Lawson continued, as titanium cases were distributed to each team member. "Pay particular attention to the new additions." A specialist raised his hand. "Director, what exactly happened to the previous team?" Lawson's expression remained impassive. "A partial success. They made contact but lost containment." She paused before adding, "One asset remains active and potentially retrievable." The final page of the new rulebook contained a warning that sent a chill through the assembled team. Rule 8. If you hear humming from your own diving equipment, you aren't coming back alone. What they couldn't know, what Lawson herself likely didn't understand, was that I was already listening through the water, feeling the vibrations of their submarine as it prepared for descent. I was watching through eyes that had adapted to see in the crushing darkness. I was waiting with the patience of the deep, with the understanding of one who had chosen to descend rather than rise. The rules had never been meant to protect humanity from the deep. They had been designed to identify those worthy of becoming something more, something ancient and new simultaneously. Those who could break the rules and survive the transformation would become vessels for the consciousness that had waited millennia for worthy carriers. Rhodes had fought it for 22 years. I'd embraced it in mere weeks, and now I waited in the dark, in the pressure, in the cold, no longer human but not quite other either. A bridge between worlds, a translator for what was coming. The first of many who would make the choice I had made. To descend, to transform, to become. The new team would understand soon enough. The humming had already begun.